Welcome to the Adapt or Die podcast. This podcast explores ideas related to self-growth, finding meaning, and living a more fulfilled lifestyle. It's your host, with the most, Armel Tala.
And it's your host, on the low, Ben Smith. We're two college students on our own path of lifelong learning with the hope that you will join us in our journey. And now, it's time for the next episode of
The Adapt or Die podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Adapt or Die podcast. Am I supposed to be saying the full title? Whatever.
You already said it.
Yeah, but look, well, you can't see if you're listening on audio, but if you're watching YouTube, I have glasses on, and they're new, and they make me feel really smart.
He's snazzy.
And that's the most important thing that's happened to me this week. What about you, Ben?
I got a haircut. That was cool.
No, I need a haircut bad. Like, actually bad. I've been wearing bandanas, like, every single day. Like,
Every time I see Mel, he's either in a bandana or a Bass Pro Shop hat, and it's the funniest thing. Cause I don't know. It's like a trend now, and, like, I don't know. It's hilarious. He rocks it, but
and I don't
hilarious.
fish. I will openly say I don't fish. I don't have any reason to want to fish. I just don't have desire to go fishing.
It's very relaxing.
It's probably really relaxing. Like, I stepped outside today, so... Okay, actually, first let's give a kind of a breakdown of what this this episode's gonna be. So can you do that for the people, Ben?
For sure. Today, guys, we're just gonna go over our personal journeys of self growth, how we started, some things we've occurred, like obstacles we've had along the way, how we've dealt with those, and then maybe a little tangent here and there of
it's going to be a lot of tangents. It's going to be a lot of tangents that's going to be contained within 30 minutes, hopefully. Around 30 minutes. We'll try to end around that time. But really, I think for this episode, one was like school's kicking my butt and, time is being taken away from us. So we're like, let's have a more chill, not so research, not read a whole book in a week, which I don't know how. I'm still trying to figure out how you do it, bro. I'm reading and I'm like, man, I've read it for like 2 hours and I'm like 3 pages down. I'm kidding. It's not that bad.
That does happen to me sometimes. I would like reading for an hour and I'd be like, dang, that's page 8? 8?
Nah, it's like it's probably a good book if you read for an hour. You're just pondering after every page. It's wow, wow. But okay. Enough of that. One, I want to say that I probably would enjoy fishing because I stepped outside today.
Mm-hmm.
I was super early. I went to GDC library, whatever. And it was just so nice. Like, I heard the birds chirping in the morning, and I was just like outside. It's like nice weather. I was like, this is so peaceful. I like it.
Dude, fishing in the morning is such a vibe, and it's like it's kind of like meditating in a way, or maybe not meditating, but it's very like relaxing. It's like reflection time. It's like because fishing, if you're going to fish just to fish. It's kind of boring, I'm not gonna lie. But if you're gonna fish just to like relax and be with people,
like
just kind of be with yourself, like in nature, it's a great experience.
It's a great experience. One of those that I probably will not have, but I'll have something close. I'll probably just sit on the water reading a book or something.
I'm sure I'll drag you to fish one time.
Maybe. But okay, so today, you guys are really gonna understand like why did we start a podcast about self-growth? Why did I decide this one after high school is like, you know what would be a best thing for me to do is talk about how to be a better person every single day. Like what started it? And I want to share it with you because I think you have you're more fresh onto this podcast technically. I mean, we're both started at the same spot, but you're more fresh. So I want to hear your perspective first.
Oh, okay.
And then we can start at the origins of like why I started it, and you can give us a perspective like what made you want to come on and like help me out.
For sure. So my journey really started probably with basketball actually. Basketball was the first thing that got me into like self-help type stuff because I would go and I really wanted to be like high school. We had like a big high school, it was like 3,500 kids. I wanted to be a good basketball player. I was gonna make it to the league. Dreams die.
Anybody that even slightly took hooping serious that came across your mind once, like it had to. If it didn't, then you just didn't. You probably didn't make the team.
Yeah. So to get better, I read a lot of books on like how to get bigger because I was a skinnier kid. Like how to lift weights, how to eat, right, all this stuff, and then that kind of led me down this path of also. I kind of had like a existential crisis my sophomore year, so I did a whole lot of research on philosophy and why I'm here, and then Christianity and a bunch of different religions, stuff like that, and then kind of all of that pushed me. Once we got into senior year and COVID hit, it was like I had so much free time. I was like, oh, what do I do? So I started reading, picking up some books. I grabbed Notion, get a schedule, organize my life, and put habits, all this stuff. And then from there, it just kind of like took off, and I've been on that journey really since then. And we met you. I met you in college, and then I remember y'all always like, this bro Ben is weird. Like y'all are all like, what? No, you okay. Floss every day?
Yeah. Oh, that's actually really funny. No, because I think it was Jen, good old Jennifer. But I think it was Jen. She was like, Jen would actually make everything you do seem so like I was crazy. I was like, I would be taken back by it for sure. I'd be like, what, you stretch every morning and like you consistently keep that schedule like this. I was just getting into the process like self growth. I'd done the podcast, so like I knew like what you were doing was good, and I was like, that's why I was like, oh, I'm really interested in this dude. Like he's doing things I want to be doing, right? But it was just so weird to actually like see someone my age, younger than me, like doing. I'm like, what? How, when did you? What happened? What happened between now and like? So but it made it. Yeah, I mean, I know it's kind of like a very boring like intro. I mean, there's life is more complex than just like I started basketball and now I'm here. Like, but we're gonna get into the weeds.
We'll get into the weeds more. I want to hear about your story though, because I know I met you and you were like, from my perspective at least, it seemed like you had just started your journey. Maybe a few months before, like right when I met you. Yeah. And so it was very interesting because I was probably like maybe a year or two ahead, and just in terms of when I started.
Yeah. No, yeah. For mine, I think our stories are very similar too. That's actually really interesting. That makes me realize more that maybe it wasn't a coincidence or something that we met, or that we both started it. But our stories are similar. So for mine, like unlike you, so we both did basketball in high school. Mm-hmm. I did basketball in high school, but I never like went into that whole like super trying to grow. Like I really was motivated. Like I would say my work ethic and everything came from hooping, just because I would like I would work. Like I promise, I really would work. I don't know who I'm trying to justify this to, but like I really would put in the work. But I never like thought of growth. So it's like if I work hard, I'm gonna get there, right? But I never thought like, oh, I gotta make sure I'm working hard, but making sure I'm growing in aspects that I should be growing in, right? And so basketball never really brought that up. It wasn't until after basketball that everything hit. Like you said, for you it was like when quarantine came and like you just had so much time. Exact same thing for me. Let's actually go back. Let's go back a little bit.
Okay.
You guys can't tell I'm bad at telling stories. So let's first realization that I like to think deeply was probably I had to bring that up. But first realization that like I was really interested in philosophy and like would think about things that I just didn't know if anybody else in my grade was thinking about was my junior year. So not you're ahead of me still there, but my junior year I had the same, I say it's like quarter life, where like I was like 16, 15
early life,
a super early life crisis, super early life. I had the same exact thing. I was like, why am I here? Like what? Because we started reading a lot about it was like existentialism and naturalism and like all these different type of philosophies, and like that was the one time in English I was super interested in. I was like, yo, like these are really interesting, questioning like everything. I did enjoy to question a lot of things. Right. So at that time it was like, yo, why am I here? And then I wrote this paper that junior year. It was like it was supposed to be like these short essays we wrote each week, and I said that when we're born, the only thing that's guaranteed from when we're born is our death, and therefore finding we aren't given a purpose. We find that purpose in between there. So all I'm saying is like you're not guaranteed a purpose when you're born. Like no one is like there isn't this assigned thing. Like that's at least what I believe. You aren't guaranteed a purpose, but through the point of you being alive and you to your death, you just spend the rest of your life finding that purpose. And then so that's when it began to me like I got to find my purpose. And then I started learning more about business, and business is what got me into more of like the self-help, self-growth, right? And it's, I had my dad around. He was like a big influence in terms of like just seeing him work all the time. Like my first job, I was getting paid $30 a day.
A day?
Guess how long I was working?
5 hours?
9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 9 p.m. is when the store closed. I would leave like 10, 11:30. This is my sophomore year. Yeah, this was going into my sophomore year, and so
Wait. So this is like during the weekend, or
it would be weekend.
or like
No,
you like
summer.
got out of school and you
Summer.
went summer. Okay.
Summertime, yeah, summertime. So like if I wasn't doing basketball, I had things, I would be working at a store, right? Built up my work ethic. So
Right.
and that's where the whole business side comes from. And I seen him run a business and all that, so I got more interested in it.
Yeah.
And then like my whole self help. After I wrote that paper, it was like around the same time that I really started doing like looking into like this thing drop shipping and everything. And then so like in between there, then there's high school, and like I kind of forget. I don't forget about it, but it's like in the background of things, right? And it's like whatever. So self growth is kind of starting to begin. I'm really starting to get interested in like, okay, how can I make money? Like that was the beginning of it for me. Was really like, yo,
I went through that phase as well.
Like,
but yeah,
but for me, it was because I was like, yo, I'm tired of being broke. Like I'm like that. Like my parents were people that did not. Your parents are the same way. I know. Like they don't hand us anything. Like they don't hand us anything.
Yeah, not that like my parents, like my family was
well off.
Like, they were well off, but like it was like as soon as, especially once I got a job, it was like you want anything, like go buy it. It was my dad was always like, if you want to make some money, like even before like I was 16, it was like, go ask the neighbor if you can mow his lawn. Like my dad was like a no BS type of person, and he still is. I love my dad, but that's where like I got my work ethic from him. But keep going.
Exactly. So it's like both our parents instilling that work ethic in us, and so I forgot where was I?
You were talking about drop shipping.
Oh yeah,
business, all that stuff.
Drop shipping. So drop shipping, blah blah blah. In high school, like my senior year starts, and like I kind of forget about it. I go back to my conniving ways, not focus on like what's really important. And then it's quarantine hits. I'm not around people. Like I was a very like at the time, like during that time when I was in high school, I was really dependent on like I was a very social person. Like I always want to go out. Like I never wanted to be inside the house. Like I had reasons for not wanting to be inside the house.
How the tables have turned.
How the tables have really turned. Like, and I always be outside. Always wanted to like hang out with people. And then so quarantine hits, and it's like you gotta just not be around those people. Like can't be around anybody. Not really. No one's like really hanging out. And all that stuff. So I finally had time to reflect. And then this is when the inner philosopher in me really came out. I knew it was there. I knew I enjoyed philosophy and thinking, but then like I would go on my stories, my Instagram stories, and I'll just rant. I'll just be ranting, like rant. Like
I know this.
Straight ranting about stuff. Like I'll be ranting about relationships. I'll be ranting about, mainly it was about relationships because I was a lover boy. I ain't gonna lie. I am a certified lover boy. Me and Drake can connect there. But just ranting. And then someone swiped up and said, you should start a podcast. And I actually went back and looked at when they did it. It was said around April. So April 2020. It was around April 2020. They messaged me and say, yo, you should start a podcast. And I was like, And I had started listening to more and more podcasts at that time. Like, I always watched YouTube. Like, YouTube was another big influence. Like, just always on YouTube, always seeing other people making content and everything like that. Yeah. So that was a big part of the motivation. But specifically, now the reason is like, okay, so you get told to start a podcast, and I'm like, all right, I can do it. So I started looking into it. I'm like, oh, this is easy. You just got to get a microphone. Distribution of guys, doing a podcast is simple. Like you just make the paying for a microphone and like a camera. You can use your iPhone if you have like iPhone 12 and above. Like it's easy. And so I was like, okay, well, this is super easy. Like I should do this. But then picking the topic was like, okay, so I do a lot of rants about, helping people out and like, trying to tell them things like about relationships. Like people always went to me about it because like all that stuff. But so then I was like, you know what? Let's start on like self-care. Like that's one of the specific way I started was like self-care. Because I started getting into more self-care because during that summer I had a really bad breakout on my, like I had a bad like acne breakout and everything. Like I got hella insecure about stuff. So I started looking really deep. Like that's when actually I'm realizing I'm bad at telling stories, if you can't tell. I did not have this prepared. But for me, it was like I had that breakout, and that's when my self growth really started. Okay. Like it really started because I was like, yo, like I need to figure this out. Like why am my skin breaking out so bad? Yada yada yada. So I started watching a lot of YouTube videos, started learning about nutrition, everything like that. Right. And then so I want to start with self care because I was like, you talk about skin, you could talk about nutrition, like eating, taking care of your body and stuff. But then as we went on, blah blah blah, I realized like I don't want to constrict myself. And I think this is around the time I met you. Yeah. That so the podcast had already been going. We were hitting topics on self-growth, self-care. I talked to a person that was anorexic, became a bodybuilding champion, someone that had Apert syndrome. There's still shout out to Trip, really cool dude. Love you, Trip, if you're listening. And like just a bunch of episodes already gone up. Right. But then I met you, and then I was like, And then we talked about wanting to expand it, do it more broad, not wanting to restrict ourselves. And yeah, and that's where we are here. That's a really long, drawn out story. If you guys can't tell, I like telling stories, but yeah, that's really it. But for me,
I remember like the way we started hopping on a podcast, or the way I joined really was like, I remember we were at Clark one day and we were just chilling. It was like maybe
frame of reference. If Clark is just like an outdoor field, if you aren't from if you don't go to UT, but yeah.
Yeah, which is So we were there. I think it was with like you, me, Rohan, Leah, Jen, just like our usual group. Maybe some other people, I'm not sure. Yeah. And then we just started talking about like simulation theory, like Christianity, like all these like very philosophical type things. And then I think Rohan and Jen and Leah, like they just sat there and like listened to us and like just straight zoned out. Like I forgot they were there. It was just me and Mel talking. And then afterwards they were like, y'all should start a podcast. And I was like, yo, we should. Yeah. And then I was like, we should do this. And then we did. And then like, now we're here.
Now I remember that because they're like, yeah, we should start a podcast. And I specifically remember we're at Clark. We're sitting on the benches, right? We're doing our thing, vibing. And so we were just talking, me and you were just talking, and like we were agreeing on so many things. Like we were both like so interested on so many things. And I was just like, yo, Ben, I was like, man, you the man, like, bro, like, yeah, and then and I remember they brought up like, yo, you guys should start a podcast too. And then from that point on, the idea went into Ben's brain, and he was like, yeah, we should start a podcast. I could tell he was interested.
Yeah.
But then like it slowly started, like your interest, like it snowballed.
It did snowball.
It snowballed. Like next thing you know, Ben was like, yo, bro, like actually, I was like, wait, time out, slow down. I mean, we could do it on mine. So. Long story short, that's how we came to be. But for yours and your journey, since I went on a ramble, I want to hear more about the nuances of yours. Like, what obstacles did you face when like you first started really like diving into researching and everything?
I mean, the hardest part was definitely just realizing how important my friends were in terms of like helping me or hindering me in what I was doing. So it was like if I was trying to, improve my diet, my exercise, like whatever. I had to go to bed at a certain time. I had to do X, Y, Z. I remember my sophomore year, to get better at basketball, I would wake up at like 4:50 or so, maybe 5 every day for like probably about like half a semester is how long this lasted, because it was like I was very regardless. Anyways, I would wake up at like 5 a.m. And I would bike to the gym, which is like a 2-mile bike ride, and then I would work out, I would practice for about an hour, and then I would lift for like 45 minutes, and then I would bike home, and then I would shower, eat, whatever, and then I would bike to the bus stop, and then I would have an hour bus drive to school. So like that was like my morning, like every morning. And then, but to do that, I had to go to sleep at like 9, like maybe 8. Like it was like you have to go to bed very early, and then you have to be very dedicated to like going to the gym. It's hard to wake up that early, whatever. And so I realized that like a lot of my friends were like, "What are you doing? Like, why are you so this?" And then so I realized how important it was to have people around me that were of the same mindset, because especially on the weekends, as we well know, like it's so easy to get caught up in what everyone else is doing, that if you don't have people that are on the same like wavelength as you, you just kind of get lost in the sauce, and then like all your like work, your research, whatever, it just gets thrown to the wayside pretty quickly, because you get in like this negative feedback loop of like, oh yeah, like dude, that Whataburger smacked, and then you end up having like you just like, oh, I could have a Frosty from Wendy's on like a Wednesday. Like, why? Like it's like, and not that I'm hating on that, but it's like I had certain goals at the time, and those weren't like, so it was like the main obstacles for me was like realizing that the people I was around was super important, and I was having a hard time like cutting people, if that made sense. And then beyond that, it was also I struggled a bunch with like really just my purpose and my meaning, and like really trying to find out who I was, why I was here, and like all this stuff. And it was like very deep questions that were like very agonizing to think about, very agonizing to like push through and like break through this mindset of like I don't have to believe what my parents believe because they believe it. I need to believe what I believe. And that was very hard to just like break out of that as like a 15-year-old. You know what I mean? So
100%.
Those are my big obstacles.
I think, and you hit it, like one thing that I find similar in both our stories is we both had that point of like reflection. We had that time where like we had to ask ourselves really hard questions, like whether it's my paper writing that there's no meaning to like there's no meaning to life when you're born besides dying, or there's no set direction besides dying, right. And yours like asking those really hard questions. And so that's one thing I realize people don't do. But for someone trying to find their purpose, like what helped you besides just asking those questions? Was there something specific? Like, was there certain things you researched? Was there someone specific you went out and talked to? Or was there books or was it just like you doing your own research and reading a lot of books that helped?
Yeah, I mean, The biggest thing is literally just being curious about it. Just like going out and being intentional and like a bunch of different resources. Don't rely on one method. So I would read a lot. I would listen to a lot of YouTube like people. I remember I watched like Crash Course Philosophy because he had like interesting stuff on like the history of philosophy and what they think, whatever. And then Jordan Peterson, I know like he has like a bad rap for like being like this like super, I don't know, like right wing conservative like whatever.
He's a cool
I don't know. If you listen to him, though, he has some very good stuff on just how to find meaning, responsibility, all this stuff in your life. It has nothing to do with politics at all. It's just straight philosophy, like straight how to live a better life. He was a big influence on me, actually. And then also just asking people around me, asking my parents, asking my youth pastor, actually, asking people at school, teachers, literally anyone I could get my hands on, I would ask them, why do you believe what you believe? How does that affect you? Like, all these questions, like getting people's personal experience, because when you think about it, someone who's lived 80 years, like they've lived 80 years, they know some crap about life. So if you ask them what they think, they have some pretty good insight, actually. And all you have to do is ask. So that was big for me.
One last question on this. So that was that, because I know for me, like, I never had those conversations with my parents. Like, I never asked, like specifically just because some people may have that same thing where they're not as super close with their parents, or like their parents are really like super strict about maybe a certain way they think, philosophy. Like, how did you go about just asking them? Was that the questions you asked? Were you like, hey, why do you guys believe in this? Or did you have to like kind of, from, I guess the word I would use is like cupcake it a bit? Like you didn't directly ask like, hey, I don't believe in this. Why do you guys believe in it? Or,
Yeah, I mean, at first it was more of like what you said, like cupcaking. It was like, oh, like, hey, Dad, like, how did you, how'd you become Christian? Or, hey, Dad, how'd it all start, whatever. And then eventually it kind of turned into, I actually told my parents what I believed, and then we had like a more like serious, like the conversation. That was deep. And it is hard, but yeah, that's to answer your question. It was just like easing into it at first, and then once I feel like I had enough information to make a decision for myself, then I asked the really hard questions, and that's when I really dove in deep. And now I'm here, and I haven't really, not that I haven't changed my mind, but I've kind of been, agnostic for like a couple years now, really.
Just exploring.
Yeah, just exploring. That's all. I'm just like open to whatever. That's where I'm at right now. I'm not set on anything.
No,
so, but what about you? What are your big obstacles? What was the biggest thing in your way to becoming the better version of Mel?
The better version of Mel, and still working towards that. Biggest obstacle. Well, number one, like, I think a difference was I asked those questions internally. Like, I never reached out for someone else. See, I think my way of reaching out was through like YouTube. YouTube's probably one of the greatest things ever.
It's such invented. A great resource, guys. It actually is. Just use it right.
Yeah, you got to use it right, because there's some really weird. Yeah. You can go down weird. You can go a lot of different holes in there. So I never had people I really talked to until I really met you. Biggest obstacle though. I would say like being like really real was me having to. And this is what I wanted to make this podcast originally over, was me having to take control of like my desires. Like, one, I would say in high school, you given the story, you saying like, yo, I woke up at 5 a.m. or 4 a.m. to go hoop and practice. I was like, okay, I'll spend in work, but not like that. I was like, as soon as I was like, obviously I was not putting in work because I was not waking up at 5 a.m. But and that was because I spent so much time. Oh, I will admit, like, I was chasing girls. I was like super. This is the typical
high school stuff.
Super hormone, like digitally running around doing all those things. And so for me, taking control of that, of like those desires, taking control of myself, because I didn't realize that I wasn't actually in control of my body. Like, something a lot of people don't understand this. I feel like a lot of people don't understand this, but you're truly not in control. Like, you are truly not in control until you realize that you are not in control.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I know that's actually a really great point. Like, whenever I'm doing something, like, there's kind of like, I know I'll let you talk about this. I'll just mention it and let you, as I know, like, this is something that you've talked about before, and I feel like you would be good at talking about it. But it's like, my body wants to do something, right? Like, I'm emotionally, I have like an urge to do one thing, but my brain's like, bro, like, this is not the right thing to do for your long-term like benefit, or even if you're even in like 5 minutes, I know I'll be better off, but it's like, man, I want some canes so bad right now. But it's like in my head, I'm like, okay, but you gotta get a workout here soon. Like, are you gonna get a workout right after you had a caniac? Like, no,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So it's like, I know you kind of talked about, but I'll let you go on. Like, how has you framed it like a war between like your body and mind? How has your journey with discipline been going for you? Like, what's your progress been like?
Like, it's literally a war. Like, that's how it is. Like, it's a war. Like, if you're on this journey of self growth, and to make sure I really hit on like the obstacle part, because I feel like I didn't really make too much sense on it. Like, my biggest obstacle was fighting like that desire of always wanting, like, go out, always wanting to go out, always wanting to do all the extra stuff that typical guys our age would want to do, and so for me, like, and that's discipline, like you said, and that journey, it's hard. It's like, until you realize that like you're not really making those decisions for yourself, like you're just like, oh, why did I even like want to go out? When you think back, like, oh, like I said like the night before, like I didn't want to go out, right?
Yeah.
And so it was like becoming aware of the fact that like I was not actually in control of myself. Like when my phone would buzz, like I would immediately go look at it. Like your phone controls you, right?
Yeah.
And so that was the hardest part about it, I will honestly say, because you become aware of it. You're like, okay, all right, like I know that I don't want to do this, and I know that like if I get around these people, I will want to do it. And then like, okay, I'm gonna see them, but I'm gonna tell them no. Like, they're gonna be like, hey, yo, you want to go out? No. What do I say? Yes, I'll do it. I'm like, yeah, like, and so it was realizing that I was not in control, and then second, actually being like, okay, how do I get in control? Like, how do I actually like get myself to be in control? And so that's when I started looking into like meditation, because meditation is something that like helps you control your mind, control your your feelings. You
yes.
In like the beginning of the day, I don't know, it brings a lot of tranquility, and like I feel like a lot of things make sense after I meditate during the day, which it sounds weird, but like a lot of things just make sense. I feel like my decision making is better. But the journey it's really like every time I think about a decision that I make, I think about it like a battle. So like the war is becoming, fully in control of yourself, having that complete self-discipline, and being able to do things because you want to and not because your emotions or like your dopamine crave like wants to do it.
So how have you been able to shift from going to I emotionally like how have you gone from shifting your desires to be able to overcome that emotional in the moment? I urge to do this, but I want to do this. If that makes sense.
That's something itself that like I'll admit, like I still haven't fully mastered, but I've gotten better at it. Journaling. I would definitely say journaling is one of those things, because when you're going through your day, like you don't want to be fully aware of everything. We've talked about this in terms of like how I think the brain works and like how efficient it is. Like your brain wants to kind of make subconscious decisions, because if you don't have to make those decisions, that's less energy your brain is using. And so when we're going through things, like it can be so easy for you to like make a decision without ever really thinking about it, or even going on to the next day, or ever reflecting on it. But when I started journaling, it helped me so much, because I didn't start journaling till spring last year. So freshman year was spring, right? Spring semester.
Did I put you on?
Huh?
Did I put you on?
Of course, you put me on. Ben put me on. Like Ben only asked that question just so you guys know he put me on. But no, yeah, of course he definitely put me on. So, but from the fall, I remember I wasn't doing as well. Like I was still like staying up later than I wanted to. I was still like not as I didn't feel like I was actually making progress. So spring. And it's in the difference, like I'm really realizing, is when I started journaling, because it made me go back and think about what I did the day before, or think about what I wanted to do. And like now it's become something where like when you write it down, have that reflection, especially if you do it at the beginning of the day. Like maybe you write, like you have a reflection of what happened yesterday. You have a reflection of like maybe a thought or something. It keeps your mind accountable for that day. Like whatever you wrote at the beginning of the day, or either the night before, like your mind remembers, like, oh, I remember writing to myself, don't do this. Like, do not do this. You want to become a better reader, man. Like I've been writing down a lot now. And so even though I'm not to the point where every single time that like I may be like just sitting around that I pull out a book, it's starting to become more and more like I'm starting to think about it more, because each day that I don't do it, I write about it. I'm like, yo, like I was supposed to read today. Like, why didn't I do that? Or I really want to read today, or I really want to get 7 hours. So for me, I think what's really helped in terms of like getting myself to make more logical decisions is by not actually fighting those emotional decisions and making it where like the logical decisions becomes tied to my emotions. Right. If that makes sense. So by journaling it each and every single day, it starts to become like, I start to get that feeling of one, like, disappointment in myself, right? So you start feeling disappointment, that emotional, and then two, then that desire to just want to do it because you keep writing about it, you keep talking about it. And so for you, I want to ask this last question because we are coming close to the end. We are. One, how did you start? How did you improve your discipline? Because I will say Ben is one of the most disciplined people. He does not play around with his sleep. First off, he does not kid on his sleep. Second, like, especially before Ben got to college, like, I promise if he didn't have friends, this man would be on a streamlined, perfect schedule. Each and every single day, just like he would be hitting like 1 o'clock. I do this. He's there at like 12:59. So how did you become better at mastering your discipline, and how did journaling play a part of that? Because like you said, you really did put me on.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess I'll start with the journaling and the meditation, actually, because I think those are really great points. And what those two things do is they help you just control your emotions. You know, like, especially in the morning, I journal, and I'll be like, I'll just write down whatever I'm feeling. I'll be like, it's just nice to just like throw out like all of your just like shitty emotions and just like let it go on paper, and then it's just gone.
I want to say something real quick about that, like, because you reminded me of it. I can't remember who I was listening to, but they said journaling does help a lot because you throw out, like you said, those ideas, those emotions, those feelings onto the paper, so then it frees up space in your brain where you don't have to think. Like, it's not always bothering you or you're thinking about through the day. But continue.
Yeah, no, and so it's just like I get to like free my emotional whatever for the day. That helps so much. And then clearing, reflecting what I did wrong yesterday, that helps a lot, like you mentioned. And then we're gonna go a whole other episode on meditation because that's like insane, and I could just talk about that forever. It's so key. I think I'm up to like minimum like 12 to 15 minutes a day of meditation, so it's like it's been going well. I've gotten like really, I just like it a lot now. I don't even use guided meditation anymore. I just like sit and it's just peace. But I think this is a hard answer, I guess, but just to like no bullshit, the way you get more disciplined is by being very clear about what you want. So you have to sit down with yourself, and you really have to make sure that your goals or whatever you're trying to do is actually what you want. Because let's say you're trying to work out 5 days a week. If you try to do that, right, but you have no clear why on what you want to do, then you're going to choose things. Well, let me back up, actually. When we do things, every action that you've ever done and will ever do is because you're moving towards things that you value. So you're moving towards things that you desire and moving towards things that you want. So when you're doing something, when you're breaking your discipline, it's not necessarily that you are, quote unquote, undisciplined, which I guess that's true, but it's more so that you're moving towards things that you want, and you miscalculated like what you actually wanted, because you wrote down you wanted to do this, but you had no clear why. And because you have no clear why, you're choosing things in the moment that you didn't think you wanted, but you actually wanted more. And so you break you go eat Whataburger instead of going to exercise because you actually don't really care that much about exercising. You actually just want to get the dopamine hit from going to eat Whataburger. Yeah. Does that make sense? So the biggest thing for me was just finding that big why of why do I want to do something? Because if you can find that, the emotion to do that will completely override anything else. It just takes over. You're just like, oh yeah, no, I don't really want to eat that because I actually want to go exercise way more. I just want that more. So it's like, don't try to fight yourself and overcome. It is a war, but it's more of a war of deciding what you actually want and executing it.
I wanna make you brought up a lot of like really good points.
Sorry, yeah.
Number one, you saying that why is so important, and I'm realizing now that like my purpose, my why, I have a much clearer why now compared to like last year. And that's why I've been like so much more been able to be like more disciplined and make a lot more progress than I did last year. And then number two, so you're saying like it's a war, but you want to be smart about it, right?
Yeah.
And so this is the last point before I closing out, unless you want to add something. I'm listening to this Michael Saylor and like Robert Breedlove, right? And their podcast about what is my blah blah blah. But they're talking about war, and they're talking about battles, and they say like there's no such thing as a fair fight. There's absolutely no such thing. We as humans, we always want to find an advantage. We don't want to go into a battle where both of us have an even playing ground. Like one, it has to be someone wants to get asymmetry in this battle, right? And so what we're doing when we're trying to like practically, I call it a war against, your mind, a war against your emotions, the war of discipline is the way you get that, the way you give yourself an advantage is by one, not trying to have your logic completely take over your emotions, but by taking your logic and then putting it onto your emotions like we were just talking about. So it's just really interesting to see how like those two different topics like war and discipline almost like come together where we're finding this like advantage. You're taking advantage of your emotions, saying like my emotions are much stronger than my logic at certain points of the time, which is most of the time. So what I'm going to do is instill that emotion of a more positive something. Instead of that negative want, you instill the emotion of the positive want.
Right. No, that's exactly what, like, that's what discipline is all about to me. It's just like taking what you actually want and being very clear about that and then executing that, because you don't actually want something if you don't do it. That's like, it's that simple, right? Because then you go back to the drawing table and I'm like, why did I do that? And it's because in the moment I wanted to do that. Yeah. That's the answer, right? Like, no one's forcing you to like do anything. I mean, sometimes, someone puts a gun to your head or whatever, but like for the most part, you get to do whatever you want, whenever you want. So if you're undisciplined, it's not because you lack discipline necessarily, it's because you lack clarity. Okay. So find that clarity and discipline will come.
I think that's an amazing way to end. And of course, you guys know this isn't our typical
favorite part of the episode.
well-structured episode, but we still have quotes from our Melius, and this one is one I picked this time. And I just had an epiphany, and it all ties with this episode very well. And I wrote this in my journal today, and we'll make sure I say it right. Impediment. Okay. All right. The quote is from Marcus Aurelius. If you don't know who Marcus Aurelius is, you should really learn. But the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Think about that for a second, because this one's hard. To me, this one was hard to grasp at first. Even Ben had to sit there and be like, what does that mean? I'll repeat it one more time. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Marcus Aurelius. And I can give a quick example.
No, please do. Yeah. No,
okay.
I know. Go ahead.
Okay, so number one, the interpretation, like, and me and Ben both kind of have the same interpretation here. It's practically like, if you want to grow, growth happens whenever you actually overcome something challenging. Growth happens where there's discomfort, right?
Yeah.
So that kind of really ties in that, a lot of times people won't want to do something. They'll stop to do something because it feels uncomfortable. Right.
But that's when you got to keep going.
And that's how you advance. Right. That's like a more very literal, straightforward of this. Right. But I'm going to give you guys almost like a different kind of, it's the same interpretation, but different with this example. So for me, and this is tied back to me, I had asked myself, I was like what really like has driven me to really be obsessed with self-growth and wanting to improve like each and every single day. And it was a whole thing about in the summer when I had the big breakout and everything like that.
Right.
And so, but I had put a reasoning for wanting to, like, my solution to all those problems I was having in the summer was I want to be the perfect version of myself. Like, I literally told myself, like, I want to be as perfect as possible. Being very naive. This was such a very ridiculous way to frame it.
I was gonna like.
No, yeah,
keep going.
It was super naive, and the reasoning for it. But my reasoning, because I still believe in the principle of pursuing perfection.
Yes,
I think that
I do too.
I think that perfection in itself, like, think about it in like zero. This is more very math, but so you know how they infinity. Sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say
So
I think infinity is a better. better
so approaching infinity. Here. So you never actually get to infinity, but like we always say, like, if you're approaching infinity, that practically is infinity.
Right.
So the pursuit to perfection is perfection. That's what I believe, right? And so, but my reasoning for it back then was that, my reasoning, I was having a big struggle. I was like, blah, 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 nobody wants me, yada, yada, look ugly, whatever.
Yeah.
And so, and then my reason was because I want everybody to, like, I want to be the most desirable, blah, 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 blah. Such a very stupid,
we've all had that.
Dumb reason.
It's not dumb.
But it's so weird that, like, I knew that what me wanting people's, like, approval, satisfaction, that was my impediment. That was am I saying that right? Impediment. That was my impediment to action, because it stopped me from doing a lot of things because I'd be so concerned about what other people thought. But then it ended up becoming what advanced my action, because it created that motivation. It created that motivation to say, I want to be perfect. I want to pursue perfection. Like that is literally like when I thought about that, that's saying that the impediment to action advances action. Like me being fearful of what other people thought drove me to the point where I was like, I want to be as perfect as possible. Right. But then my reasoning has changed now. Thankfully, my reasoning has changed. And for me, it's just now my reasoning now is like, I just want to see, like, I just want to push myself to my potential. I want to see what my potential is. I want to improve.
Yeah.
And I want to do it for me. I want to do it because I know that it will lead to me being happier, lead to me being physically, emotionally, spiritually, and everything happier if I push myself to what I believe to be like my limits, my capabilities. And I want to see that because I just don't believe, like, if I have all that potential, like, why would I waste it? I feel like I did it. I wasted it with basketball. So now I'm like, I don't want to waste it in life.
Right.
So I hope that made sense. That was a really drawn out quote from Armelicus Melius.
Can I give one quick analogy?
Yeah.
This is a classic analogy. You've definitely heard this before. But, like, the whole thing with, like, the impediment to action being, you know, the way or the action, right? Think about, like, just how muscles work, right? To build muscle, you have to tear muscle. It's very uncomfortable, right? So, like, the impediment to building muscle is actually breaking it down. So the hardest things to do are the most challenging because they grow you the farthest. They grow you the most, right? So that's kind of like the whole thing, in my opinion, of what this is saying. It's like the hardest things to do are the things that push you the farthest. And I like this idea. I think I got it from Tim Ferriss. It's something to the effect of your success is the conglomeration of the amount of uncomfortable things you're willing to do. And I think that's a really interesting way to frame it because, like, you have to be able to go through life and do uncomfortable things to really get what you truly want. That makes sense because those things grow you the most. And so I think it's what Mel was saying. Not that you said it really well.
No,
I thought I would just throw
that was
on
that was another great analogy. That was another great example. And so leave it off one last time, I will say, because this quote really now resonates with me.
It's such a good quote.
The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Marcus Aurelius. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. And yeah, this was a very more personal. You guys learned a lot about us. I spilled a lot of tea that I don't know now if I want it to be out there on the internet, but I really don't care.
That's too late.
So we did. I'm already on the internet too much. So you guys, make sure you follow us on the subscriptions. A lot of socials, all going to be down below. I'm not going to have the normal spiel like usual because we're already way over time.
Facts.
But thanks for listening. Peace.